There we go. And we are recording. And today is the 13th of December, 2016. And you are here with Sarah, Peyton, and Barbara Morgan. And we are going to start with phenomenology and brains and go from there.
Yeah. I mean, the thing for me with phenomenology is it seems very simple. You just be here now and be in your body, and yet it's so difficult for people. That tendency to go into the past or sometimes into the future is so strong. And as soon as you start to use language, then I think it gets much harder. And sitting with clients and being in that place of, the phenomenological place is tough without becoming too, too authoritarian, too intrusive in saying, come back to your body, come back to your body, come back to your body, because that really is where the present-centered awareness is. And yet when you can, it's so powerful, so profound, really, that everything that we need is here in the moment. And there is a lot of writing and talking about this now, isn't there? And lots of people, Eckhart Tolle and various other ones who are really emphasizing this here and nowness, mindfulness, that kind of stuff. But I think it's really hard. And I think the other aspect of it for me is, psychotherapy is a wonderful invention and it's helped millions of people. But the tendency with psychotherapy is really to go with the client's story, and the story is in the past. And how do you enable the person to stay in the present? Some form, I'm Gestalt based, and I think Gestalt, probably other ones as well, helps you to be more body based and in the now. But, when you have such a fixed story about who you are, then to shift that means to break down your whole identity. It's a deconstruction.
Yes. I often think of the body and speak about the body being the convergence point for past and future, and for the convergence points for the emergence of what's really, really alive and in the present moment.
Yeah.
I have the experience in both constellation work and in the depth empathy work that I do, that the more we stay with the body of the client and the body of whoever's doing the facilitating, the more.
I think we're taught so early, really, to, we get into school and how much body stuff do we do in the school environment? Less and less, actually, less than even when I was at school. The children don't do as much PE or running around or any kind of body awareness stuff like we used to. There's such a focus on the left brain and analytic thinking and learning your sums and your reading and this sort of stuff.
Yeah, and there is no present moment, really.
No.
In the left hemisphere. That emergent world is the body connected neurons of the right hemisphere that give us a sense of what's coming up and what's emerging.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting the right brain stuff, because there's people who argue with me about this. Say, oh no, the brain's not split in two. There isn't a left and a right and this sort of thing. And I say, well, I've got some people who say it is. The woman therapy.
and your amazing countryman Ian McGilchrist,
yes.
The master.
I point them in the direction of the tome,
Yes, that's right. For those of you who do not know, the master and his emissary, it is a thick book. Yes.
One thing that really touches me is watching young children these days, and how, if you really allow a child to lead the way, if you're child-centered, and it is difficult these days, they are utterly present. And they force you into the present. There's nothing else that matters apart from this moment.
Yeah, this brings up the whole question of supporting parents who are finding themselves having to having problems with anger and abuse with their children, because if your brain is carrying that trauma load, and the child brings in the present moment, then the child is almost, it's almost like the child's presence is inviting the horrors to resurface that are there, that are just waiting, like tickling to come up. I was just working with somebody who is having a terrible time with their child, and they spontaneously started working with a drowning incident that happened to them when they were the same age that their child is now.
Goodness, right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think children will press your buttons in the way nobody else will. Really. Press, then for sure they're going to press them. You know?
Yeah, and people are often wondering, why does my child push my buttons so badly? And part of it is, I think, exactly this. This is occurring to me in this moment, is that there's that invitation to the present.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, the way life is run these days, it's so fast and task-based, and we have to get you here and we have to get you to school, and then the toddler has to come along as well and sit in the car seat and all this stuff. It's so anti being present, you know, and the child's not given chance just to dawdle about and daydream and be in their right brain, you know, float freely, do what they need to do when they need to do it, you know, that kind of just being is very rare now, and I think it's sad, and I don't know what that means in terms of what will happen, you know, when these people grow up, you know, what kind of experience will they have had as a child.
In the US, I think we're already starting to see it, because we're starting to see like both higher percentages of narcissism in college students and college graduates now, and lots of articles coming out defending narcissism, defending avoidant attachment, you know, talking about how it's an evolutionary adaptation.
Goodness. Right.
Yes, despite the fact that there's, you know, there are decades of research on how avoidant attachment, which is really for those of you who are not familiar with that term, it's the term for being raised without much connection to the body, which is what Barbara was just talking about with the movement through time and space and not being able to stop and dawdle. I love the word dawdle.
And you know, the other aspect of that is social media.
Yes. Well, social media is sort of interesting. Let me just finish about avoidant attachment, that there are decades of research that show that people with avoidant attachment have lower life expectancy, less of a sense of meaning, more health burdens, more health issues.
Gosh.
Yeah. So even though people are writing these articles justifying narcissism and avoidant attachment, we're really flying against the human possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's our natural urges for connection. We're not isolated beings. We're pack animals, you know. We like to be in groups. We like to connect in groups, you know, and that is largely lost now, you know, because of the hustle and bustle of life. And I had a friend actually who came to the States. I can't remember which part of the States. And said she just wanted to go for a wander. But where she went, it was cars. It was like
cars and fences and land posted, no trespassing. Yeah. It's really hard to find places to wander.
Just to have a free float about somewhere is really difficult. You know? I was working with somebody yesterday who was trying to connect to her mother, and her mother used to be up in the hills, you know, to find her solace and to be in touch with herself. And she had an opposite experience, like she felt isolation when she went into the hills and all the rest of it. So, you know, we were working trying to bring those two together so she could be in the hills with her mother.
And not feel, the isolation.
And not feel, I mean, her mother's dead now, but, you know, that she could kind of conjure up a sense of her mother and an image of her mother so that she could go and enjoy the hills in the same way as her mother had. You know, so bring those two together. It was beautiful, a really beautiful experience for both of us, actually. It touched me as well, because, I mean, I find walking in the hills so nourishing for myself. You know, I did it every day as a child, and it's a wonderful way of being. And if you can share it with somebody, it's really amplified. And walking with young children, for instance, you know, where they spot so much that you would miss otherwise. It's just magical, and that for me is like true attachment. You know, you're really connecting in the now.
Yeah. And sort of in counterpoint, you had mentioned social media.
Yeah, just looking, you know, I mean, my two children to start off with, you know, and they're not extreme, but trying to have a conversation and eye contact with them, you know, oh, it's just incredible, really, the amount of time that's spent on their phones. And you climb on a train, and 90% of the people have got their phone in front of them.
Yes, I took a cue from one of my mentors, and I asked my latest group of trainees to not have their devices in the training room.
Yeah.
To if they during breaks and so on, if they were going to be on social media or on the internet or on the phone, to leave the training room, so that the training room would be a space where it would be clear that connection was possible and welcome.
Yeah, I've started doing that because you know, some people are actually looking on their phones during the sort of thing. I find it incredible. Like, how can you be present if it is on whoever's going to be ringing you or contacting you on Facebook?
Right, and it's a neural management device, because every time there's a connection with somebody that you know, there's a little tiny shot of oxytocin.
Oh, really?
Yes, with every Facebook like, there's a little shot of oxytocin.
My goodness.
Yes. Or if you're feeling competitive about it, there can also be a little bit of dopamine. Like if you're getting more likes than somebody else, or if that's something that you are invested in, then there's also dopamine. So it's a sort of a neurotransmitter reinforcement tool.
So does that mean it's kind of addictive in some way?
It definitely has addictive qualities.
Right.
And it's also complex. I mean, it's also got I think people have the opportunity of having a sense of community. Now, one of the pieces of research that I've seen about Facebook is that if you're connecting with close friends, then you end up feeling good at the end of the interchange. And if you're connecting with people who are just acquaintances, then there's no net gain in a sense of well-being. Yeah.
That's reminded me of what you wrote about pain.
Yes.
People who are accompanied by a stranger, the pain is less, but if it's by someone they know, it's even less again.
Yeah, it's even less again.
Yeah. So that resonance is really important, isn't it?
It's so important.
Yeah.
And I think we can get it from social media. You know, especially if we're living in isolated places where we don't necessarily have a sense of tribe. I know that
you're sort of saying in a way what the advantages of it are, that there are some, I mean, you and I are talking across the world.
Yes, exactly.
Everything we're talking about, we're using.
Yes, we get to be a little bit of tribe despite the distances. Yes.
So I do have mixed feelings about it, because in a way that is amazing. It's magic. You know?
Yeah.
It's the same as going up in an airplane. It's every time I think, God, how does this machine get us all off the ground?
Yeah.
It does. And I don't like it. You know, I feel really mixed about it.
Yes.
I wouldn't be able to go and see people. I would never have met you if I hadn't been on a plane. You know.
Right. And at the same time, it's depleting our ozone layer and having strong economic or ecological effects. So yeah.
So, you know, it's such a mixed bag, and we can't go back. You know,
no.
we can't go back to the Stone Age or anything. But what my image is like a sort of a scooping back, like what can we gather up from what was before and bring into the present experience, so that the present experience is more full, more satisfying. Because I do think there are an awful lot of people around who are not happy.
I know. Yes.
And
Yes.
that's got to be to do with connection and attachment and all these things, don't you think?
I think so. I think people are, there's beautiful new research right now that's about how loneliness affects the human body, and how if we're lonely, it's as bad a health risk as cigarette smoking.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah. So how do we in this world, which takes us away from community, from local community so much?
Yeah.
How do
You
we?
can be with people and still be lonely.
Yes.
If you have an avoidant attachment,
Yes.
you're
Right.
in yourself, you're not actually connecting and you're not getting the feedback from people.
Right.
The
Right.
people are not able to touch you, so you're still lonely, even if you've
Yeah.
got people around you.
Yeah. Exactly.
I worked once with a guy who, I mean, he didn't have a label, but he had that kind of schizoid tendency, shall we say, and he would be in a group and then he would be watching with his left brain. I mean, this is my analysis of it, obviously, trying to understand how do these two people connect to each other.
Yes.
Sometimes he would like be watching a couple arguing and he'd say, oh, okay, so that's how you get through an argument. Or, oh, that's how you make a friendship. You do this, you say that, that person says that. It was really sad that he was trying to work it out with his left brain. How do I reach out? How do I make a connection?
I think this is one of the reasons that Stephen Porges, who is the researcher who's done the most work with the vagus nerve and polyvagal theory, I think this is the reason that he links autism and Asperger's so strongly to the vagus nerve. Because when the vagus nerve never really enters the ventral state, when we never really enter the place of social engagement, which is such a neurobiological, magical place of fine motor responses from facial expression to facial expression, from voice to voice, the awakening of the eyes, the awakening of the ears to the human voice. There's this full body awakening that happens when we move into that state. And what Porges has been working on has been linking a lack of being in that state of social engagement and Asperger's and autism.
Right. So, and is he saying that starts in the womb, or
he talks about stuff that happens in the womb. I don't think I know that. I don't think I've seen that piece of his research yet. Mostly what I've seen is that he's doing he's supporting integrated listening systems where the kind of sounds that are being brought to the brain awaken the brain and move it into ventral vagal, and then looking at that effect on those kids.
Can you say a bit more about what that means? Ventral vagal? Don't quite understand.
Ventral vagal is that social engagement state. So in traditional autonomic and nervous system study, sympathetic and parasympathetic, they believed there was a balance of sympathetic and parasympathetic.
Right.
But what Stephen Porges discovered was that there's a third place that's not a balance of the two, but is its own animal that awakens all of our social engagement capacities.
Right. Yeah. And that people with autism don't have that, or
that their system does not easily move into
the
social engagement, the entire social engagement network.
Right.
Yeah.
So how does that sit alongside, and I don't know where I've heard this, my understanding that a lot of autistic people don't have a filter system, so they're very exposed to the field, if you like. Their boundary is not very kind of strong.
I have on my list of every month I do a different subject for research, and autism Asperger's is on my list for June, I think, or July years. We can talk again when I know more.
I'm absolutely fascinated by it. I mean, my ex-husband's stepson is Asperger's, and he's 20 something now, mid-20s, something like that. when he was a young child, I was fascinated by his process. Like he once went round and hung a coat hanger on every door handle. And then another time he was at school, he was very good at maths, as is often the case with Asperger's children. And he came home one day and he got all of his sums wrong.
Oh.
The teacher called his mother in and said, "Don't understand, because he's brilliant at maths." And when she asked him, he said, "I was fed up with the look of crosses. I liked the look. No, I was fed up with the look of ticks. I wanted some crosses on my page because they look nicer." It's like a totally different lens.
Right.
And then he coloured the sun red one day, and the teacher told him he was wrong, and he's saying, "But the sun is red. You know, how can you argue with that?"
Yeah.
You know.
Oh.
You know, it's great for me. What I like about that, and that's what I enjoy in talking to you, is I like to have my assumed worldview challenged.
Yes.
Like, oh, okay, I've always assumed this and this and this. No, maybe that's not so. Maybe it's slightly different to that, or maybe it's very different to that. You know, it's great.
It's wonderful that you like it, because because I mean, I have to, work with myself on this issue about whether or not I like my worldview challenged.
Right.
I tend to get
I have to do a body shuffle, like.
I tend to get an idea in my head and just want to stay with it. So I try to, like, I was forcing myself to read the latest ideas about PTSD yesterday with a panel that Rachel Yehuda did at a conference, and the panel was titled, "What do we believe now that we didn't believe a year ago?" Something like that.
Oh, nice.
How are we, the researchers who study PTSD, changing allowing our definitions and
yeah, I mean, you're constantly changing your worldview.
Yes.
Like, reading you too, You're not somebody who's stuck in your worldview at all.
In some places, I see where I am reluctant to change. So a good example to come to the study of microchimerism, which you and I have been talking about, and that I spoke about at Burnmead, and there'll be a little bit about it in the
next
journal issue. When you asked me to bring the citations for the article, some of the citations were newer than the ones that I had looked at before I was at Burnmead. Right. And some of the citations were like, not only do the cells, so I'll say what microchimerism is for those who don't know, that microchimerism is the study of the appearance of other cells in our bodies. How do other cells enter our bodies, other people's cells, other people's DNA? And what they've discovered is that when a woman is pregnant with a baby, that baby's cells enter the woman's body through the placenta. That's decades after the baby's birth, there are cells from that baby in the mother's body, which speaks so beautifully to the traditional way that constellation work looks at abortions and miscarriages, and so that those beings are still present in our bodies if we've carried them at all. In Burnmead, I was saying, oh, these cells are fabulous. They protect against Alzheimer's. They protect against heart disease. And then
that was amazing.
Yeah. And then I was looking at the new research when I was sending it to you, and it said, and then there are some of these cells that can cause autoimmune disorders. And I was like, oh no, my beautiful picture of the baby contributing is challenged. How will I speak about this in a way that still captures my excitement, but lets me take into account the fullness of the research?
It's both wonderful and
yes.
horrific,
Yes, that it can have that effect. Yeah.
So will you talk about that more, do you think? The microchimerism, is it a developing project for you?
This year at Burnmead, I was asked to speak about migrating and research about the brains and migration. So that's what I've sort of been on the trail of. And so far it doesn't have anything to do with microchimerism, but if it does, I find it fascinating. So I
Yeah.
do try to stay tuned
Yeah.
with that. As you say that, I realize I haven't tracked who those researchers are, because once you know who the researchers are, you can put in requests to be notified of their new research.
Oh, okay.
So that's one of the ways that I stay up on the research that I'm interested in. The people who are doing PTSD research, the people who are doing the genetic transmission of trauma. I am subscribed so that I get their latest articles.
Is it reading your main way of researching all this stuff?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Reading and creating. I choose a different subject every month and do a teleseminar about it, so that I'm integrating the latest research, pulling it all together, allowing it to enter my hopper, and hopefully letting in the things that are contrary to my established ideas.
Right. Well, that'd be a good thing for me to be, because I'm actually much more stimulated by oral, when I'm hearing.
So if you hear it, yeah.
I do read, but I certainly don't read to the extent that you read. I mean, if a book really grabs me, then I read it right the way through from beginning to end and don't put it down. But if it doesn't grab me in the first few pages, then I put it down and I might get back to it, or I might not. And I've got that kind of ambivalent relationship with it. And I think hearing and talking and discussing is much more alive for me, like TED Talks, those kinds of things I really can get fired up by.
Yeah, and when people are good storytellers, it helps. TED Talks especially, good stories really help information enter the brain and enter the body and be remembered.
Yeah.
So
tell me about your book. When is your book out?
My book is coming out in September of 2017.
Right. And what's the title?
The title is Your Resonant Self. And it will be, it's Your Resonant Self, Guided Meditations and Exercises to Engage Your Brain's Capacity for Healing.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
Well, hopefully my second book will be out by then too, so maybe we'll have a joint party.
Oh, that sounds fun. What is the title of your book?
Well, I haven't got the title yet. It's about mothering. It's a very huge subject, obviously, and I've been throwing a few titles around, but I haven't quite got the title yet. And that's also got some guided meditations, like my first book had.
Oh, beautiful.
Much more focused in on, it's not just constellations, it's mothering. It's wider than that. And I've got contributions from, various aspects of mothering. So people who've had, birth experiences, that kind of thing. And then mothers of children who've died, and mothers who have miscarriages, and all kinds of aspects. So, yeah. So it sounds like we met. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what writing a book is like. You think it's going to take 2 months and it takes 10 years, so I'm aiming for this year, towards the end of this year, but yours is already with the publishers, is it?
It's with the publishers, it's with the copy editor, and it'll come back
great.
next week for me to cross the T's and dot the I's.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Is this your first book?
It is.
Yeah.
It is my first book. Yeah. And I love your first book, and the title of it has just slipped away from me. Tell me again.
Coming Home, a first step into the world of family constellations.
Yes, it's a beautiful book, and I recommend it to all of my students. And
Thank you.
They love it, and they talk about it.
Right.
They share that they loved it, so it's fun to have it as a resource. Yeah.
That's the title of I haven't got an organization, I'm a sole trader, but I call myself Coming Home, because that so speaks to me.
Yes.
The idea of coming home to yourself.
Kind
of coming home in terms of where your roots are and your family and that sort of thing. It's kind of a whole body, a whole soul experience, I guess. Yeah. So
kind of brings us back around to phenomenology in a way. I mean that the home is that moment.
Yeah. In the moment, and you know, and it makes no difference for me whether my parents are dead or alive. I can still feel them now, you know.
Yes, yes.
I just have to kind of evoke them, and I think that's what a wonderful gift. You know, it's lovely to have that, to be able to do that, and that's, you know, part of what I try and pass on to people. You know, that yes, somebody might have been dead 20 years, but you know, I mean, this must be something to do with the brain as well. Maybe you can, you know, enlighten me on that. Like, it's possible to evoke their presence.
We carry them with us. Everybody that's been close to us,
Right.
we have parts of our brain that are devoted to carrying everything that we know about them, including a theory of mind about them.
Right.
So we continue to we can continue to know how they would respond, or to make very good guesses about how they would respond,
Mm-hmm.
based on everything that we know. It's like they are living inside of us.
And would that be lodged in the right brain or the left brain?
It's lodged in the precuneus, and the precuneus is a piece of brain tissue that's on both sides. And the right precuneus, it's right back here. It's a little strip right back here in the cortex. And the right, in particular, carries autobiographical memory and the sense of self. Yeah. So this is one of the reasons that it can be so excruciating for people to have a breakup with a long-term partner, or with a partner who's been really important, is that they've got this, it's like they've been grafted. It's like we become grafted with the people that are important to us. There's an interweaving of the very tissue of our brain, as well as sort of the love of our heart and our spirit and soul, but we become literally on a tissue level, intertwined with one another. Yeah. And so I think part of what we are doing, part of what you are doing when you're inviting people to realize that they can still be in relationship with a mother and a father, even if they've passed, is it's almost like an awakening of the brain from the shock of death. That the shock of death is so stunning that it makes that brain tissue go dormant in a way. And we begin to believe, that we couldn't access it, because there's a confusion between what's outside and what's inside. And so when the outside part dies, then the inside part thinks it's dead as well. Right. But there's like an awakening that happens in the constellation process, where people begin to have access to those resources of love and ancestry. And I had the most interesting experience lately, speaking of ancestors, and also to draw on an experience that you and I had. You and I were doing an ancestor, it was a trio thing, and yeah, and you were my ancestors, and then we had my client and me, and my ancestors were so angry at me. They were so angry because I wasn't acknowledging them. And these particular ancestors that I had in mind were actually, well, they were insanely violent with their children, and they took land in gun battles, and there was just lots of child abuse and horror. And I was like, how am I not acknowledging these? I mean, I went away and I worked on it. I was like, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to work on this. And the most beautiful thing happened lately, just last month, that seems connected to it. I had an adopted son who died. You know this. And in the constellation that I was having, these ancestors were behind me, my father's line, and my adopted son was in front of me. And all of a sudden in the constellation, these ancestors broke through and came around and embraced my adopted son. Wow. And it was so stunning. It was just, I still feel it in my body, this sense of a dam breaking. And of being able to touch the love. Yeah. It was quite something. It felt very connected to the work that we had done that day, which was like 2.5 years ago now.
Was it?
Yeah.
Was that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was powerful, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Gosh. And when did this experience happen with them coming around and embracing your adopted son? Was that quite recently?
Yes, it was maybe 3 weeks ago or something. Yeah.
It takes that long sometimes, doesn't it, for something
Yes.
to
Yeah.
through and take effect? Yeah.
Yes. And I think there's also, we were talking about the world, how big it is and how we're separated. And I think in the constellation community, especially once we're doing work where we're doing it for others and we're teaching, then we're so rarely receiving.
Yeah.
We really have to be in a very special location, circumstance to be the receivers, to be the clients.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
that's so important, isn't it, when you're giving out to find a way to, I mean, the giving out itself is nourishing, of course.
Yeah.
It's a circular process, isn't it? You get back I get back as much as I
Yes.
But it's nice to go. I went off to Belgium a few weeks ago and did a workshop with Snay.
Oh.
Yeah.
And you were the client.
Well, I was in the group. I didn't work on a specific thing, but just being in that environment was unbelievable, And I got on my Eurostar train, which takes less time to get from London to Brussels than it does to get from my hometown to London.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
Yeah. So it was great. So I don't do that very often, So
yeah. It's nourishing.
Yeah, to be in a kind of a natural environment as well as, it's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
A nourishing environment in nature, and then you connect with people, and you connect with people on a different level. Especially if we're doing constellation work, we're connecting on that soul level, and so it's special, And I mean, I found that with Ben Reed.
Yes.
Isn't it strange that we meet once a year for a week, and yet the connections are so strong?
Yes, and so nourishing.
Yeah.
And to have the opportunity to be in a group of peers is just extraordinary.
Yeah, and to share experiences and difficulties, all the rest of it.
Yeah, and it really brings to life the sense of how representatives contribute so deeply to constellations, and having groups of representatives that know the world of constellations and know themselves within it, and have a relaxation and a capacity to commit deeply to what's emerging.
I find that quite a difficult thing to get across to people. I don't know if you do, when they're new. This is because I don't know how you work, but if I have a group, I don't have a differential price range. I don't have people who are going to play more than people who are coming as representatives. For me, it's an open field, and we just see what happens.
Yeah.
And I say to them, you will get as much, if not more, from being a representative as from being sitting in this seat as the client or the seeker. Yeah,
I believe that. That's so true for me in my experience.
And mine. But it's hard to know that in advance, isn't it? When you've had experience a few times, then you understand what I'm talking about. But some people who come new are not sure that what I'm saying is true. So they think that they're not going to get chosen, and then they tighten their bodies, and then they're not present, and then they don't get chosen.
Yes, it's so true. I actually do charge more. I mostly set it up in advance and do charge more for the people who are receiving, just because
makes life easier.
It does make life easier. I like my life to be as easy as possible. And then at the end I have a lottery for everybody who's not who wasn't, because mostly what happens is that the people who sign up first are the ones who get the slots. And so then it's the people who have come later or have found about it later or didn't know about it until the last minute, and then everybody still has at least a chance to.
I know a lot of people do work in that way, but
but I was just traveling all over the US with Elena Veselago in November, and she was the one who facilitated the constellation that I had spoken about, where my ancestors came around, And she does it very much the way that you do it. She works with who feels like they're coming alive, you know, in the circle.
What is the field wanting to happen? You know,
Yeah.
it's like somehow
Yeah.
what's emerging, who's emerging from the field, what energy is emerging from the field. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So it may be that inspired by you and her, I may go in that direction eventually. But
yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the people you're working with as well, doesn't it? And how you sit with it in yourself. I mean, I don't think there's one way to do it. It's just difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
My own experience, when I look back at all my different representations, I have got such a rich experience in my body from being a representative.
Yes, we get to be grandfathers and
I mean, I was a heroin addict once, and I've never taken heroin in my life, but it was really incredible to have an inside experience of being a heroin addict. Although I was spinning, I was spinning.
Oh, wow.
So the memory of that is really strong in me. Or being a schizophrenic 2 or 3 times, or someone who had a psychotic breakdown and was totally cut off. All those sorts of things the memories of them are in my body, and I think they're really crucial.
For me, they expand my sense of being connected to the human race. Yeah.
Like deep empathy somehow.
Yes.
I know it from inside my own body.
Yeah.
Music really resonate in a different way with somebody.
Yes. And this is really the mystery, and the magic of constellation work that can't even begin to be named by neuroscience in a way.
Yeah.
There are these
woman who came to the last workshop that I did, who happens to be a client of a supervisee of mine. So this is because I don't normally get to find out people's experiences afterwards. And she didn't do her own constellation, but she got chosen to represent a bomb.
Oh my God.
And it turns out that I think it was her grandfather who was bombed. And, so she had a direct ancestral experience of it all. And she gets chosen to be the bomb, without anybody knowing. And she was just blown away by it because it was her first experience of constellation work.
Oh. Once I was doing a constellation that had torpedoes in it. And the woman who was chosen to be the torpedo had been born in the city where torpedoes were first manufactured, invented.
Yeah.
So it's very...
It's funny, I mean, that happens over and over again, and I still say, how amazing.
Yes, completely amazing.
Yeah, I'm still surprised.
We're coming to the end, but I'll close with one very amazing and beautiful constellation experience where it started out with there was a baby, and the representative was like, I'm sifting powdered sugar over this baby. And and we were like, why powdered sugar? In the end, it turned out to be a constellation about Hiroshima.
Wow.
Yes, and so it gives me goosebumps even now. Yeah. And we didn't even know that it was that until it came out. Yeah.
Powerful stuff, isn't it?
Yes. Barbara, I had a marvelous time.
Me too.
And so we'll post this on YouTube and we can share it, and I hope that we will do it again because I love seeing you and it's really fun.
Lovely. Okay. Let's do that.